Okay, good evening, architects, and everybody who's watching the digital architect session. Again, it's our pleasure to have our special guest here. Of course, the digital architect session, yung mga susunod pa po nating mga weeks, will be in cooperation with Foundry. They are our partners for the rest of we have 3 more weeks for the digital architect session na ang ating guest and our speaker for every Saturday night at 9 p.m. will be mentors from Foundry. So for tonight, we will be talking about rediscovering history. And our guest for tonight, actually, hindi ko alam kung naalala na to eh. But our guest for tonight is we go way back. No? We go way back, literal na ano ba? Since college time. Ewan ko lang kung naalala to. Kasi he was my professor. Of course, architect Ferdinand de la Paz is a graduate of BS Architecture from UST in 1992. And he started his journey as an academic architect 5 years after having worked for Palafox Associate. For over 16 years, he has taught in his alma mater while pursuing graduate studies, which has led him to earning coursework units in urban planning and in archaeology, both at University of the Philippines, Diliman. Nandi has also taken up certificate degree programs in interior design and in construction management during 1 year stay in the U.S. East Coast. And since 2014, he has been teaching at the La Salle College of St. Benilde's architecture program, where he has served as its former program chairperson. He has also taught at Polytechnic University of the Philippines for 2 years. Currently, he is now crafting his thesis proposal under the Master in International Business program at Benilde, where he aims to assess the business model innovation in the local architecture firm practice. Very recently, he has officially started his appointment at Benilde Center for Education Technology as its coaching and capacity building unit coordinator for faculty. He is also here representing History Theory Cluster of Foundry to share his talk entitled Rediscovering Histheory, Viewpoints from the Past as We Envision the Future of Architecture. So let's welcome Architect Nandi de la Paz. Good evening!
Hi! Hi, JP. Thank you for having
Kamusta
me
po?
here. Oh, maayos naman. Malalim na Tagalog. Maayos na maayos. Ganun lang ang attitude.
Ayan. I just like to share with everybody. Maayos. That's good to know. Correct. O, di ba? Lahat tayo dapat laging masaya lang. Saktong-sakto. Yung, yung intro ko with your topic, yung rediscovering, the past to the future. Because I want to share to everybody that the architect Nandi de la Paz, I don't know if he remembers, but sa kanya ako unang-unang nag-apprentice. Because he was my college professor. Naalala ba yan, sir? Sa nag-apprentice kami actually with Jom and Gerard as a researcher for your thesis at that time. Hindi ko na maalala sa dami ng pinag-aralan
ko. Ano yun? It was
yung thesis mo sa Sampaloc. Yung we have to go around Sampaloc and ask around, check everything. I was part of that.
Kasama pa si Dushim eh. Yung classmate niya na di ba? Si Dushim. I remember that kasi umakyat pa kayo ng Espanya Tower.
Di ba?
Ha?
Oh, yeah, si John.
Yeah. You went around Sampaloc and basically did the
French
legwork.
nga ba siya? I think, parang French siya.
French.
So,
Yun.
So it's fun to remember the past. And also, it's good to know that,
Oo, pero ano, I hope that
So,
nga,
I know
I
medyo
hope,
may konting delay lang sir.
yes,
I think it's my connection, yung problema.
okay lang yan.
So, yeah, hindi ko na patatagalin, Architect Nan. I'm
All
sure
right.
you have so much to share. Maraming kaming matututunan sa'yo. And of course,
Yes, JP.
ayan, sorry, medyo parang delay tayo. But yeah, you're here to discuss rediscovering his theory, viewpoints from the past as we envision the future of architecture. So I'll give the floor to you. Ikaw na magdire-diretso and I'll be back later after a few more minutes when you're done with the presentation for Q&A. Thanks again, Architect Nat, for being a part of TDA session. And thank you so much for, giving us a little bit of your time to share what you know and to the TDA audience. So,
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much again for inviting us, inviting Foundry, and I am here on behalf of Foundry, specifically yung History and Theory cluster. So, um, may I may I know by way of comments in the comment box how you are feeling right now? If you are doing fine, feel free to chat a comment. Okay. Anyway,
labas na ako ng screen It's all you.
yes. All right. Okay. So let me begin, and this is just going to be less than half an hour, and I hope that my presentation would give you a different way of looking at history and theory. At the same time, I want to personally share my journey with this particular subject. So um, I hope my screen is clear, and I hope that you can hear me clearly. So let me begin. Good evening, everyone. I invite you to a journey of rediscovery, one that will take you to reminisce as you relive your days while you were still a student in architecture. So for those who are practicing already, I want you to try to recall that chapter in your life, geographically or otherwise, wherever you may be right now, and whatever stage you are in as far as your professional life is concerned. This simple story urges you to be mindful, meaning being in the present, of how much you know about architectural heritage. And by architectural heritage, I'm referring to anything that happened a minute ago that's already considered heritage, or yesterday and way before that. So as far back as you can recall. As you look forward naman to the architecture of the future. So our built environment and the important role you play in shaping it. So we'll try to look at the opposite poles, and of course, in the middle is where we are at present. Allow me to begin by briefly explaining the structure and nature of the second keyword in my title. So you might be wondering, anong word yung nasa title ko? Medyo hindi siya common word. Okay? So I'd like to share what it is, why I titled it that way, what it is not, what it means, and what its message intends to convey. Okay? All right. So I hope you're seeing the second slide. So you see here a word which I will explain shortly. Ever since my uh, grade school or primary education, I studied in Marist School in Marikina. English, both the literature and the language, has become one of my favorite subjects, okay, alongside math, world history, science, and of course, fine arts. To this day, I continue to learn about and be amazed by new words and terms that add to my vocabulary every single day. I have also developed this curiosity for finding out the origins of any word I encounter. Okay? Its etymology. So if you want the real term, the etymology, if you want your nose to bleed, but it's actually the word which means uh, the origins, where I learn about the word's original version, whether the syllables or the definition of those syllables when you break down a word, okay, and look for its origin, basically its roots. So this eventually morphed into a passion for combining words in order to coin new terms. Mahilig ako mag-coin ng word. Tayo naman when we give a name to a project, or when we just want to simply uh, create or coin a term, we have a way of doing it. And this is usually drawn from the desire to sound catchy, witty, or minsan gusto mo maging wise sounding. Okay? So after several failed and successful combinations, I then searched for what these combined words are actually called. And the word I was actually looking for is what you see on the upper right portion of the screen now. That is called portmanteau. Okay? So you also see on the screen what it actually refers to as a thing. Okay? So you see there, and it's defined there. It refers to the trunk, derived from the two words port and manteau, okay, to carry a coat. So first, it refers to the image that you are seeing, that I borrowed, and the source of that image, and this is the only source. It is the only image that I borrowed from someone. But actually, more than that, portmanteau is kind of word that is formed by a particular pattern. They are not merely combined in a single manner. So dun sa left portion ng slide, you see there what kind of combined words it is not. Kasi baka sanay kayo nung ganito lang mag-combine. But a portmanteau has its own way of creating. Okay? So they are neither contracted, so example ng contraction word, nor is it simply compounded, yung pinagdikit mo lang pero wala kang ginalaw dun sa dalawang words na pinagdikit mo. Okay. There is a criteria in order to form a portmanteau word. So you see there a brief description of what a portmanteau and how it is formed. So there is actually a basic formula to it. So I'm showing you now that there is an easy formula. It is actually very easy and very simple to apply. The key is in the choice of words that you would want to combine. And the magic happens when you are able to combine them to form a unique, exciting, and witty result. So I want to see in the chat box a comment if you're up for a challenge, because my next slide will actually allow you to exercise it in just a matter of a minute. So are you up for it? So let me go to my next slide. Okay. So just to exercise whether you can actually see the portmanteau word. So I have here two words. One is, both are actually equations. So if you remember the character Humpty Dumpty in the story of Alice in Wonderland, you would see there that this actually is derived somehow from that story. So I have two examples, and I want you to guess whether you do it now or do it later. So the first one is actually a portmanteau. Mims, two words is this made out of? And if you look at the other one, the number two naman, I gave you two words that I want you to think of a portmanteau for it. So you can just list them down now and do it later, and perhaps you can chat later kung ano yung mga sagot nyo so we can proceed. Alright, so let's go back to why I'm explaining portmanteau. It's because my second word, my second keyword is that in the title is actually my own, it's my portmanteau. I created this portmanteau word because I wanted to communicate a particular message. So if you look at this title now, excluding articles, article na word, yung mga the, and, mga ganon. What familiar words do you see? I want to ask you how many words and what exact words do you see? So I don't know if it's very obvious to you now. And if you want to type it in the chat box, that's also fine. But I want you to see the beauty of portmanteau words because you can actually communicate the relationships of these words in one. Okay. So, like what happened to Humpty Dumpty when he had a great fall after sitting on the wall, I want to break this down into pieces. So we are now going to deconstruct this portmanteau word and look into each of the words as it relates to my talk. Oh, sorry. So, all right. So let's begin with rediscover history. So that's the first word that you would obviously see. I don't know if it's because of the color, but that's the first word that I used. So let's take back. I want to take you back to your college days. In college, this may not have been your most favorite subject, and I don't know what reasons you may have if it's really not your favorite. Of course, some of you may remember it to be one of your favorite. Probably you did not like it very much of the because of TMI, too much information, right? Or perhaps because of the experience you had uh, having drawn a lot of plates for HOA more than you did for design. Okay? But beyond all these, there are more reasons why you should revisit this very important um, subject or body of knowledge for architects. Again, um, if you're a practicing architect, perhaps this subject is figuratively and literally history to you. So I invite you to open again your minds to what it is. So it is quite easy again. It's quite easy to fall in love with this subject once more. In fact, you just have to answer or be ready to ask four basic questions for you to get to know history once again. So let's begin. The first question actually is a very simple question. The question of what? As a language, the history of architecture primarily consists of facts about what. So whether you're asking what the name of the structure is, which is very, um, which is a very, it's one of the most frequently asked questions, naming the structure, or perhaps you want to find out what its type is or the typology, or you want to identify what its component parts are para tayong mga doktor or mga di ba, we identify the body parts. So the same way we treat an architecture, we identify the parts or the elements or the components. And more than that, we want to find out the specific terms or the names because even if they're the same element, they're called differently depending on the style that you are dealing with. Or you want to identify the patterns, okay? Or you want to identify the unique feature of a particular structure. And practically, you want to find out everything associated with the building or the structure. So it's always a what question. So let's look at a few examples now, which I have for each of the questions. So aside from being able to see and identify it and be able to read it, it's also important for you to know how to properly pronounce it so that when you're in that actual place, you will be understood. Or it's a way of giving respect, of course. So As in learning any language, you are expected to know and be able to clearly spell out the complete accurate name of any given architecture. So again, better yet, pronounce its local name or its local pronunciation the best way you can to give due respect to its true identity. So what I'm showing now is actually one of my favorite examples, even in review classes, because when you spell it out, and we know that this is, of course, the pag in-spell natin if we read it in English, you may read it as Louvre, but that's of course incorrect. Okay, that's not the proper way of pronouncing it. And right now it is functioning as a museum. So when you go, if and when you get the chance to go there, you wouldn't ask a French person directions going to Louvre Museum, but you would want and attempt to, of course, pronounce it ha- the way it is supposed to. So um, I would remember hearing this, that it's the tour guide would always say we're going to the Musée du Louvre du Paris. So syempre arte na lang natin yung ano yung pronouncing it the way the French does. But knowing it wouldn't harm you, and it's a way for you to also learn to love the culture in its totality. So I encourage you to to practice it at sometimes. Okay. Now another example of a what. So if I ask you, although I already identified the structures down there, um, let's look at this example. More popular because of its dome, this world famous cathedral is more commonly referred to as the Duomo di Firenze or Cathedral of Florence. But it's the complete name is right there. Catedrale de ano nga ba yung nakalagay dyan? Basta ano Santa Maria del Fiore, if I'm not mistaken. So it's going to immerse you not only at the architecture and its design, but the whole culture, as I've said. Another example is something like this when you enter the structure itself. So you see there what it is and where it is. Some foreign words or names of buildings are easier for us to translate due to our Spanish heritage. So incidentally, this picture is of structure or a particular piece of architecture in Spain. And this is inside the central market. So yung pangalan niya, Mercado Central. And we are very familiar with, it's easy for us to understand these terms. Located at the heart of Valencia in Spain. And here's one more. And very distinct, of course, this architecture. Locally referred to as Casa del Osos. It's a more it's not Spanish, but it's actually a Catalan term. When translated in English, House of Bones. Okay, as seen through its visceral, skeletal, and organic quality. So when you get the chance to go inside, you will see that its design is very reminiscent of bones and skeletons. So yun yung idea ni Gaudi. Okay, but this is the first set of pictures actually just dwells on the what aspect of history. But there's more. I told you there's 4 questions. So the next question pertains or is actually the question of who, pertains to a person or a group or a people linked to any architecture. We are often fascinated with the lives of those who are behind each masterpiece. But mind you, they are not necessarily architects in title or in the role they played. Okay? So it's not always just about the architect who designed or is behind this structure. You may perhaps be interested in other persons. Okay? This particular example is of someone who is not an architect, but I gave you find there the Spanish, but I'll read to you the English translation. Inside the magnificent Cathedral of Seville in Spain, or Sevilla in Spain, we find this portrait hanging on a wall. Okay? And this person is actually Justino de Nieve y Chavez. Who is he? Well, he is there for a reason because he is described, yung exact translation niyan, yan yung nandun sa bandang baba ng portrait. Illustrious Sevillano, charitable and exemplary ecclesiastical canon of this holy church, promoter of the foundation of the Hospital of Venerable Priests. He died in 1685 at the age of 60. So it's a handful of information about one person, and this is another way of appreciating history because you get to know the profile or the person behind something or behind what you are actually appreciating. Another example is this one. Okay, so while a great number of you may be fanatics of religious architecture, the architects, the all the other people associated with it, others are fascinated by or in awe of the royalty or even noble clans, such as this example, the Medici family, and I'm just showing you a portrait of one of them, one who belongs to that family, who practically designed Florence and significantly contributed to its Renaissance. Okay, so this is a portrait of uh, Christina Di Lorena. Okay, so if you look at the family tree of the Medicis, um, it's a quite it's interesting. In fact, I had to search for because when I photographed this, I did not take note of who she is. So I had to search the other night. Sino ba tong sino ba tong initsuran ko? And I could not misrepresent who she is until I ended up seeing and discovering siya pala yung isang naging wife ng isang Grand Duke belonging to the Medici family. So it makes it makes studying it or recalling history more interesting because you get to know stories. In fact, meron na to mga videos or movies about their lives because they are well celebrated as a family. Okay? Another person uh, is this, okay, this particular architect, and I don't know if you can identify, but he's labeled there. So perhaps you are fascinated by that, or you like hearing about the stories of the lives of these architects. But the sad story normally or sometimes happen, and the tragic death of this great Catalan architect is a fact. When he was knocked down one quiet night in the year 1926 by a tram on his way to his obra maestra, his masterwork, La Sagrada Familia. So every day he would go to La Sagrada Familia, pero one unlucky night, nasagasaan siya ng tram. Okay? A sad ending to a life of seclusion and solitude because towards that chapter in his life, he was lonely, he was in seclusion, he was really focused on finishing his work. In fact, he dedicated himself to this last masterpiece, which actually remains unfinished to this day. So we're looking forward to its target completion and was continued by somebody else. Okay. Now, another question would of course be, aside from what and the who, it's the where. So kung kayo naman yung very particular about location, location, location as what realtors would prioritize. As we study architecture, we need to know, aside from identifying the structure, where it is located because for one, you might want to actually visit it, and another is for you to know its context, where exactly the building is located. It matters because we want to know its context, its community, its culture. Okay? A space becomes a place with beautiful architecture. So, kung meron kayo naalala ginawang quiz siguro na sa inyo na binigay na quiz na match the structure and the location, then this will bring back those memories. No wonder architects love to travel kasi you want to see architecture in its physical reality. Right now, the most we can do is virtual tours or virtual travel. But I'm sure there will be a rebound travel after this pandemic. Okay? So if I ask you where do you plan to go next, I'm sure you already have and you can type in the chat box. Nakita ko may sumugot Marikina. Hindi siguro yun sagot sa tanong nito, but start planning your next destination. And identify the exact location where you want to go. Okay? So again, allow me to show a few pictures in relation to this question. So Talking about where, this actually is a photograph of a town. Toledo is a quaint Spanish town sitting on a valley. So I took this shot uh, through a window opening as we were walking our way down. Um, Kasi medyo hilly yung town. So walking our way down, I saw this particular scene. I took a shot of it. But more than this beautiful shot, this town actually is famous because it has been a sword making sword making hotbed for 2,500 years. We were able to visit one swordsmith factory, in fact. Okay, so for 2,500 years siya yung so it's a center or hotbed for sword making. It is in fact regarded as the Spanish city of swords. Sadly, today only two artisans remain to keep this ancient tradition alive. So that's a fact, and this is something that is, it's interesting to know because they will not forever stay the same, and perhaps we can do something about it. Another is this. So I remember seeing a lot of souvenirs displayed, normally ref magnets displayed this way. And this is of one town, Sintra, as you would see in some of the tiles there. Sintra is a town located in the Greater Lisbon area, Lisbon region of Portugal. Okay. The tiles, as one of the tiles depict one of their famous structures, yung Peña Palace actually, one of their famous landmarks. Alongside painted images of sardines. So baka nagtataka kayo, alam ba't merong tile na sardinas? Okay, it's there for a reason. It's an important symbol of that town. So why are sardines such a big deal? Not only in Sintra, but in the whole of Portugal. It all started with, and there's a story behind it. It all started with Saint Anthony. This is Saint Anthony's Lisbon's patron saint. So during one of his expeditions, he was having trouble converting the people. So he turned to the fish, sardinas. Legend says that the fish listened to his sermon and he took it as a sign of God. So whether that's something you want to believe in, the sardines play a role. So interesting fact yan about the place. And here's another one. This actually is an overlooking shot of the town of Granada. And if it's familiar to you because of its architecture, Granada is where you find the palace and fortress complex Alhambra. I'm sure inaral yan ng college. Alhambra in Andalusia, Spain. Very famous because it's a combination. It's one good example of Islamic architecture in Europe. Okay, so let's move on to the fourth question. It's a question of when, and when is also another key question that history asks. Okay, and we ask every day. When deals with the temporality, or in simpler terms, the time aspect of architecture. And I would want to share that there are, as I see it, there are basically four ways of studying time or interpreting time. And I know that you would remember this because, again, ang ating history of architecture ay hitik na hitik sa mga dates. So the first one is knowing the exact date. So whether or not you can tell the exact date when a building was actually built, as in full, from month, day, month, date, and year, that's good. But you can at least know the date in terms of when it was in century, or the decade when it was built, or even the exact year. Okay, so hindi kailangan yung full date. Another way of looking at date is in terms of age. So time in relation to age. How old is this house, for example, if you're asking while you're looking at an ancestral house? Or whether you want to find out how old was this structure when it got demolished. In the case of those which are intentionally demolished. Another time aspect is duration. So time in relation to duration. How long or how much time did it take for this architectural wonder to be completed? And this is normally discussed in HOA, in History of Architecture. How long did it take for this particular Gothic cathedral to be completed? Yung mga ganun. And it's just a matter. It's just focusing on length of time, and it's an interesting fact to know. Even today, if you're talking about a project, you want to already tell your clients, for example, how much time it will take to complete this project. And the fourth aspect of time is frequency. How many times has this cathedral been restored? Okay, that's a question you might want to ask. So, for example, if I ask you, would you know how many times the Manila Cathedral, pang ilang buhay na ni Manila Cathedral? This is the question that I'm throwing at you. Okay. Now, some examples lang. So, in terms of time. So, you see on the screen the long history of Cordoba. Cordoba is a UNESCO World Heritage Town in Spain, and this is a scale model showing it. And when you walk around the streets of Cordoba, you'll find some structures na parang mukhang Roman or iba-ibang influences. And it's because of its long history. Another example is this, but here what I want to focus on in terms of when is you imagining this particular space or this particular spot when it was lived, when it was used. So inside this monastery, and this is a monastery in Portugal. Inside this monastery, you might begin to wonder who actually walked through these intricately and elaborately designed arcades. So the lady in the picture is a modern day woman, but I just captured her as a subject. And if you're wondering, sino yung mga shadow? So that's me hiding in the slender column with the afternoon sun behind me casting my shadow. And the other person in the shadow is Architect Gerard D. Architect Gerard D is a classmate of JP and is, of course, our main founder in Foundry. So, moving on from history, the other word that I inserted in this portmanteau is actually the word theory. Okay. Theory is a twin sister, as I would want to put it. Theory is a twin sister of history. Not necessarily older, but perhaps wiser. It raises more difficult questions about architecture. And let's try to look at two questions related to theory. Okay. The first being the question of how. In architecture, we are more intrigued by how something was made, designed, crafted, built, or created, which now combines all the previous queries or questions. So damay na we bring back the four questions earlier. The question on what is related to how, because we want to find out how, what materials of construction they used in order to have created it. Who were the people behind the creation of the whole and its parts to make it possible? Where were the materials sourced from? Okay? And more interestingly, knowing that the source of the material is so far away from the site, how did the builders manage to transport the blocks of stone from its source to the site? So ito na yung question ng how, knowing deeper than just pieces of the four other questions. And the question of when is still related because we want to find out how are they able to complete the construction within a short and limited span of time. So it's like simply asking casually, how the heck did they do it? Ganun lang siya. It's a deeper question, but this question actually already brings in all the other four. So let's look at a few examples. And you might want to ask yourself, how did they do that? So I'm showing the first one. This is, of course, Angkor Wat in Siem Reap. And I don't know if if it's a question that will come into your mind, how did they do it? When you actually go there, you'll feel the you'll feel you'll feel and experience the immense scale of the structure, and connecting it with the time aspect. Wonder how did they do it at that time, because the technology then was of course limited. Okay, or you may probably be uh, in awe, or you are basically very curious about how this was conceptualized to achieve this result. Okay, so this is you know if you look up and then you're inside the St. Peter's Cathedral, St. Peter's Basilica, you look up in one of its domes, and this is what you would typically see, the skylit dome or cupola from inside. This is the view from inside. Okay. Another example is this, and this is actually a very intricate um, carving stone, parang woven stone as I described it there. But actually, it is purely made of stone, but it doesn't look at that way, di ba? So it's a question of how did they do that? Parang very curious ka all the time. But um, keeping in mind all the five questions, so meron na tayong five, yung who, what, who, where, when, and then the question of how, there's one more. And of all the questions, this is the most difficult, but convincingly the most exciting one to look for answers to, or to seek answers to, because this digs deep into finding out the reasons behind every architecture done and those yet to be conceived. So whether you're trying to explain, and this is what I got from studying archaeology, yung always trying to explain how that happened. So archaeology is about that, yung looking for evidence to explain material culture, or to explain how it came about, how something came about. But you have to use scientific data. Urban planning naman, of course, as we know it, is forward-looking. So for you, you may probably ask this question about the past as you also ask questions with the projects you are conceptualizing for now. Okay? Why a certain element is designed a certain way is not always revealed and known. Lalo na kung about the past, minsan the most you can get is a photo but no stories behind it, no explanation. And perhaps when you get answers, sometimes it's blurred and questionable. It's not reliable. It's not, it was probably just passed on without having been corrected. So we get tons of versions of the same, versions of different answers to the same question. But of course, we do not stop asking this question. Okay? So when you get the next travel opportunity, begin by answering your tour guide this difficult question. Lalo na if the tour guide is explaining an architecture, di ba? Why did they build this? Yun kaagad. So that the tour guide would be challenged to tell you the complete story, because for sure, even if you just ask this question, you would naturally get the answers to all the other questions earlier. I'm guaranteeing you that. So medyo mape-pressure, may stress yung tour guide sa inyo. Perhaps some of you might be the one to be asked if the other tourists find out you're an architect, and they would expect you to answer that kind of question. So be ready. Okay? So let's look at a few examples. So this one is one portion of the La Sagrada Familia. And here I'm showing you this because my question here is why it was designed that way. Why Antoni Gaudi designed it that way? For what reason? And I shared there on the slide what probably was the reason behind it. Okay, so you can just read the the English if you don't want to read the Spanish. So, colors of God's beautiful universe seen through the psychedelic windows of the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona. So I asked the question I asked is why Why did he design it with different colors? And you can ask a different kind of question for the same of um, about the same structure. Another example is this: why are cathedrals very vertical or very directed upwards? Okay, so devotion to God through the verticality of the cathedral of this particular example, this monastery of Hieronymus in Lisbon. And we know that the story behind the verticality is the essence of Gothic architecture. All right. So in the process of asking, I hope you also do your part in putting together or adding to the pieces by this rediscovering some of the following aspects of the story. So the picture is simply a marker, a historical marker that I took a shot of. But what I want to say here is that um, it's not enough that you know everything about the architecture. You have to know more about you have to know more beyond the architecture. So there's the narrative, the language, again the etymology if you would want to, and then the meaning and especially the message. Okay, and I'm towards the end of my presentation, but what I want to now invite you to do is actually recall, and I don't know if you saw uh, the hidden third word. Okay, because you might be asking after learning the what, when, who, where, why, how. You might ask, so now what? Now that you know so much about this, what do you use it for? Okay, so let's go back to our portmanteau, that yung his theory, and discover the third word as I revealed now. Okay, so I don't know if it was obvious a while ago that history, theory, and then there's the word story. So you do not need to be a serious historian, nor be a sarcastic theorist. Lack of better term, sarcastic na isip ko. Not that all theorists are sarcastic. To appreciate architecture, you can just look for this third hidden word. You just need to be a lover of stories, like everybody else. And as you evolve, allow yourself to become the storyteller. Like the role you play up with your clients. Diba? You tell stories as you imagine. So, as far as the past is concerned, recall the stories of the past. Remember at present, remember. And if it would make you happy, relive those stories at present. Kaya nga yung iba would go as far as restoring a structure and actually try to live the way it was lived. Okay? So you can go that far. But if you're more concerned about the future, how do you use um, stories of the past and the present for you to be able to, in a more grounded manner, reimagine the stories you want to tell in the future, because you will not just invent a story, and it's difficult to invent a story. There are so many stories from the past that you can extract chapters from, and you create your own story. So you reimagine the story for the future as you design it. And let me leave you with this tip. Okay, so if you want to rediscover history, it is by underlining. So literally and figuratively. So I literally underlined it, but figuratively, it is by underlining the story that makes architecture more powerful. Throw in some math and science or even snippets on art. If you want to impress, borrow a line from one theory, and the rest, as they say, is history or is from history. And with that, I'd like to thank you for listening. Um, I also want you to check out our website, Foundry, or our FB page. Foundry, of course, is more than just a progressive school that provides review classes for for those taking the board exams, but we also hold webinars for practicing architects. Um, so I invited to check it out. But again, I hope that you were able to pick up something, and thank you very much. I don't know if JP is going to come back. There she is.
I'm here!
Hi, sorry,
Yes,
I don't know if I
thanks
got
again,
if it took me
Architect
too
Nan de
long.
la Paz. Nakakatuwa. No, it's okay, it's okay.
All right.
Marami talagang kwento eh. Marami
Yes.
talagang kwento ang history and theory. So, of course, we cannot really put it together na sobrang ikse. So, but yeah, I think ang hugot ko with the whole presentation is that yeah, it's really about telling a story. And I think it is
True.
the best way to actually transcend what we know from the past to the future because, kailangan lang nating malaman paano sila nabuhay, ano yung kailangan, and how it adapts to sa atin ngayon. Pero tayong mga arkitekto, we understand that. Kasi pinag-aralan natin eh. And I
True.
also agree. I also agree na ako, aaminin ko, no, na nung college ako, I really didn't like history.
Aha.
Una, because ang dami kong ido-drawing.
True.
And ang daming shading, ang daming, ang daming, di ba? But it's, matagal siya gawin, matrabaho siya when it comes to plates. And secondly is, maraming i-memorize. And then, third, nakaka-intimidate po yung libro. Nakaka-intimidate yung Fletcher kasi ang kapal-kapal na niya and it has sobrang liit na text. So, when I was a student, nung college ako, I didn't like history. Pero, nung nagpa-practice na ako as an architect, now na, matagal ng panahon mula nung graduate ako, I appreciate it more. To the point na, part ng goal ko is to buy another Fletcher and really, read it again. So, siguro the reason why I'm sharing this, no, is I think as a student, I did not have that appreciation nung bata pa ako because I didn't understand ano yung importansya niya
Yeah.
sa profession ko, ano yung importansya niya sa clients ko, ano yung importansya niya. And it's the same thing eh. Sabi nga nila, akala nila ang arkitekto is drawing lang. So, architect Nan, um, what can you say when people say na drawing lang yan, eh, ang dami nga nating pinag-aaralan eh. Alam mo yun, ngayon na I'm sure a lot of people who's not very aware of what we study and what we know, magugulat sila na, ay, pinag-aaralan pa pala nila yun. Diba? Can you explain it in a layman's term? Why is it important for us architects and also those who are non-architects to appreciate what's the past and how we apply it to our future?
Yeah. That's actually a question that would help me um, convince anyone. So whether you're an architect or you're just an enthusiast of architecture, that um, it is important to study history or to learn about, again, let me now just use the term story, to know the story behind the architecture, because that will already give you all the ideas that have come out in the past. Hindi mo na kailangan mag-invento ng bagong storya, lalo na kung the direction is for you to innovate or to give a new twist. You cannot twist a design or tweak a design kung hindi mo alam kung how many times na yun na-twist or na-tweak. And it's only in knowing all the chapters of its past or its story will you be
Mm-hmm.
able to take off from it. Okay, so if you're just forward looking without being backed by the complete stories of the past, you might completely be clueless. Like, for example, one example is you want to specify a color for a project, and the project has a theme, but you don't know the color palette or the color set of that style. So paano na? Dahil hindi ka or hindi ka interesado sa history, hindi mo alam na merong meaning yung mga ginagamit na kulay. And of course, having that as as being natural to you, it's not only to impress your client, but it's for you to really uh, be be respectful and produce something authentic or real. Kasi mahirap yung makriticize yung gawa mo na may mali kasi hindi sumunod doon. It's not too true to its character. Unless really really creating something na may fusion. So I'm trying to I'm trying to
Hindi siya magiging tuwid eh. Yeah.
I'm trying to set aside the dreaded word history and theory kasi nga allergic mga tao doon sa term na history and theory. So I'm just pushing for just know the basic story behind the architecture. Eh yun naman yung yun naman din yung appealing sa lahat regardless of the age. Kung sa bata, matanda or middle-aged person, the story behind anything is always interesting and fascinating. And let your architecture tell its own story. So yun yung I would now pull you towards uh, focusing on the story. Siyempre, automatically, na yun, kasama na si history. Si theory medyo medyo mas malalim-lalim pa, medyo mas mahirap pang ipasok. Pero kasi can you have a story, have a narrative for your design. For anything, in fact. I hope I answered your question. Yes, JP. JP?
Chapsuy.
There's a bit of delay. Oh, anyway, what else? What else do you want to ask? Hala, mukhang naputol si JP. Anyway, again, while we're waiting for things to normalize, I'd like to thank my friends who are listening now, no, mga nag-chat, mga nag-greet sa chat box. Imported from Ilocos. Pero imported from Ilocos. Hi, Miss Pompey, Miss Kat. Ay, hi also to Lawrence Pascual from Marikina ba to? Kaya nilagay Marikina. At merong student si Miss Pompey, si June Montesa. So, I hope that, and we're waiting for JB to come back in. I hope that you somehow got inspired to look again and study without really studying books. Pero just try to read about one short story every day of about a building or about the person behind the building, and it will add to your body of knowledge. So yun lang naman yung yun lang naman yung ating goal. It's for you to to have a bag full of stories with you, especially if you want to have a source of ideas, and it's normally taken from stories that have been told by others. And we're just waiting for JP to come back in for us to. If you have questions, you can type it, of course, while we have the time. And also, while we're waiting for JP, I'd like to add that um, if you are interested in forecasting the future, you can only do so if you have a very stable um, set of information about that particular trend of the past. Kasi para madali na, di ba? You can you can refer to what has already been presented in the past. And I don't know if JP is coming back anytime soon, but let's just wait for a few minutes. And again, you may throw in any question that you may have there if JP is coming back. And this happens in live streaming. So thank you for your patience. Let's wait for JP to show up. So I'd like to thank you for listening, and for if you are interested to uh, discuss more about this, you can freely message me, um, and get in touch with me, and we can have a storytelling. We can share among friends, our own stories about architecture. So JP is just logging in, and I see her window opening. Ganito na talaga ang ating current situation ngayon. Puro tayo nasa virtual box.
Kanina, we had Architect Boy Roldan, we had Elda Magno, we have Tony Valdez, a lot of people, we have Pompey Agustin. So marami
Ayan,
po
may
nakapanood ng iyong presentation, and I'm
okay.
really, really sorry that I'm having a problem na pabalik-balik ako. And again, I would like to thank you. Ito. Ayan, merong isang comment bago ako makapag-closing. Ayaw talaga. Sorry, ayaw talaga. From Pompey de Leon Agustin, as architects, we just have to appreciate the works of our masters in architecture. Be observant and critical. Thank you
Ayan,
again.
thank you, Pompey, for that comment and for
Nakikita ko siya pero
reinforcing the
ayaw niyang
idea.
mag-pop up.
Nag-pop up siya. I'm seeing it.
Again, isa pa. Show.
Nakita ko na, nag-pop up siya sa screen.
Ayaw eh. Again, Architect Dan, I'm so sorry. Ayan, lumabas na. I'm so sorry kasi mahina yung internet ko.
That's fine. Thank you again for having me.
Maraming salamat. Yellow ko. Again, thank you so much. I will have to get back to everything else, and I know a lot of our viewers got so much value from your presentation. Although hindi tayo nakapag-question and answer ng mahaba because of my problems with technical problems. But with your presentation and how you describe, how you presented it, how you told the story of why and how history and theory actually helps us architects and as well as everybody else get to know what we should be designing, living in. Diba? It's part of everything. It's part of our way of life. It's part of our design process. It's part of getting the right solution. So again, maraming salamat.
Thank you. Let me
do
just
you have
end.
any
Yeah, I just want to add that for you to better appreciate architecture, just ask questions. Just ask the right questions, or just ask any question you could think of, so that you get the answers that you are hoping for. And just keep yourself, stay curious. Stay curious about everything. So thank you, JP. I think JP got cut again. But thank you everyone for spending your time with us tonight. Watch out for the other talks that JP has opened for us from Foundry, and for other talks that she would have in the future, um, about other topics that is of interest to us architects, and everybody else related to us. So with that, supposed to close it, but I'm just waiting there for JP to officially close this.
So sorry ulit, Architect Nan. So, I
Okay
would
lang,
love.
uma-adlib na ako as host, eh, di ba?
Oo nga eh. So, papanoorin ko na lang ito later. And then, yung sana, ito, mabalikan ko lahat ng nasabi mo.
Yeah.
But again, thank you so much, Architect Nan. Do you want if you want to invite them to any, I know you want to talk about acid.
Acid.
How do you say it? Acid.
Acid.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oo.
Yeah. So
I
please do invite them.
yeah, while I'm representing Foundry for this particular talk, um, I would soon and working it out with JP, I would soon be guesting again. I'm already telling JP. But the next time I share, I would bring in naman and talk about Acid. And Acid is an online platform that we have set up along with some younger designers, architects also. But that particular platform naman is more towards studying trends in design. And so it makes sense that I'm talking about history as we study and analyze trends in design for the future. So yeah, I look forward to seeing all of you again when I guest for Acid on behalf of Acid. But for now, I'm promoting Foundry, another platform, another progressive hub for architecture. So thank you,
Ayun. So
JP.
again, thank you, Architect Nan. So for now, we talked about the past and how it connects to the future. Next na makikita natin si Architect Nan de la Paz is when he talks about acid, which is more of the modern time naman, mga future part of architecture.
Mga
And thanks
future
again,
casting yan.
diba? Thank you, Foundry, for being a part of TDA session. We
Thank
will have
you.
2 more sessions in Foundry. And yeah. So again, maraming salamat po sa naka-join in sa ating episode
Yes, thank
tonight.
you.
Sabi ko nga, mga big time star yung mga nanonood. Diba?
Oh,
So, yung
salamat.
mga,
Oh,
diba?
I hope I can get the name so I can personally thank them at least via messenger. But thank you so
Big
that I can
names
also
ang
start
mga nanonood.
so I can communicate with them also. But thank you very much to everyone. Bye.
Ayan. Bye, Architect Nan. Thanks everybody for joining us tonight. Next week we will have Architect Gerard D for Rule 7 and 8 naman, of course, part of Foundry partnership with the digital architect. So have a good night, everybody. Good night,
Bye
Architect Nan.
bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. And broadcast na. So sorry. Papa, putol-putol. Yan ang
Stop
problema.
broadcast.